As we say here in New York, yo. Hello, everyone. This is Gene, and I'm back with another video. It's very early, and I've been up for about like 4 hours, and it's like a little after 6:30 in the morning right now. But I figured while I still have a little bit of free time, whatever in the world that is anymore, I just wanted to sort of give my, I guess, wrap up or final thoughts about the stream, debate, conversation, however you want to term it, that I had with Tristen of Nerdette's NewsStand this past Sunday. So it's been about 3 or 4 days now. First of all, I enjoyed it. I'm not a big fan of like streaming as a medium. I have nothing against it. It's just not something really I do or that I'm comfortable with. So I for like the tech issues on my end, I apologize. I tried to deal with them the best that I could. I am not joking when I said that I am a boomer when it comes to streaming, and I don't know what I'm doing. um, but it was nice. It was nice to actually have a comics conversation and actually, like, at least for a time, see the person that you're um, talking to, right? That was nice. And again, I apologize for the tech issues on my end. I saw some people talking about the video lagging. Tristan mentioned it to me also, sort of like in the background, right? That there were lagging issues. I apologize. I have no idea how to deal with that. You know, streaming was not a consideration that I had when I bought this computer last year, right? Or sound issues. Again, I'll do my best to rectify those if I stream again anytime soon. I got an offer. I think it's from Taylor for November 20th. I'm still mulling it over because I got real life to deal with, and November is a very busy time for me work wise. So I'll mull it over and I'll reach out to you and let you know if I can, or if there's maybe a time where I'm a bit more available. So there's that. But to focus on Tristan's stream itself, right? Technical issues aside, I found it very fun and something I appreciated, especially at the end, because I looked at the live chat after it was over. I didn't have the YouTube, I guess you could say, feed open because I was just trying to make sure that my poor computer didn't crash. Looking back at it, I probably just should have followed the live feed, the live chat on my phone, but I didn't think of it at the time. But what I appreciated was that, of course, being that it was her stream, right? It's on her channel principally. I'm sort of going into her house of sorts, right? Her lion's den. I don't exactly expect to win over her audience, but what I really appreciated, both looking through the chat and then seeing some of the comments, was that while of course her audience, generally speaking, is going to agree with her, right? That there were people who were making comments saying, I don't agree with Jean, but I can respect her opinion, or the point she's making, where she's coming from, which I greatly appreciate. Like I said, debate, disagreement, argument doesn't have to be a war, right? I personally don't come into a debate, generally speaking, trying to go, oh yeah, I'm gonna own you. I don't find that productive most of the time, right? So I don't necessarily expect to necessarily change a person's mind, right? I think most of us, whether you agree with me or you agree with Tristan, right, already sort of have our minds made up about these particular issues that are listed here. But for me, at least, and I think for Tristan and others too, but I can only speak directly to my own experience. For me personally, um, what I like about a debate when it's respectful, which this was, is the fact that while my ultimate position may not necessarily be changed, and while my opponent, I guess you could say in this case, um, their position, or in this case Tristan's position, may not necessarily be changed or moved. You can kind of understand where the other person is coming from, or where people who are similarly minded to them are coming from, right? take for example the first topic that we discussed, right? The whole bounding in the comics thing, right? And why Tristan doesn't trust them as a news source, right? Now, while I agree, I disagree with her, for example, on her assertion that to report on like resurfaced tweets or whatnot is to be complicit in cancel culture. While I disagree with that position, I now have a better understanding of why she has that position, and especially when it comes to her accusations about Bounding being less than honest in their reporting as according to like Chronicon numbers and sales. That is something I will take into consideration if, for whatever reason, I find myself, looking up that type of information. Uh, the whole like business side sales issues is not something I typically cover on my channel. I'm focused more on the creative part because for me it's like even if your sales model is perfect, which for comics it's very much not. There's a bunch of issues with the whole sales approach and sales model in comics, but I like to focus more on the work because I think that's the most important thing. If your product is bad, it doesn't matter what your sales model is. Bad product is bad product, right? And bad customer service is actually worse because if you have good customer service, right, you may be able to charm a fool or two into buying a bad product. But if you have bad customer service, which these days comics collectively does, sadly, at least the mainstream, if your customer service or your customer fan interaction is bad, that will turn people away from even the best product ever that you could produce. So those are the topics that I tend to focus on. But if I do, end up doing a Chromacon video or a business numbers type thing, right? That is certainly something I'll take into account doing research on the topic, right? So I appreciate having that information, having sort of my viewpoint or my knowledge base, I guess you could say, expanded a bit, even if ultimately I disagree with Tristan's position on things or on bounding in general. What I do appreciate is that while, of course, we disagreed on a lot of things, which is to be expected, we also did agree on some things. We, for example, agreed, generally speaking, that the pandering is not helping in comics, right? And that when it comes to any news source, whether it's on the left, the right, a fan site, or whatever, you ultimately need to do your own research, and that even in that, right, you have to be mindful of your own biases, right? Everybody's got a bias. Everybody has an agenda to some degree because everybody wants to, prove that their position, their argument, um, is the right one, right? So there were a few things that we ultimately did agree on, which is nice too. Now, I just want to sort of address a few things because I did look at the chat later after the stream was over. Unfortunately, I can't access the chat now, at least not on her channel. I can see the chat on mine, but my chat wasn't terribly active. But I believe Comic Boom, who has his own channel, um, I believe he left a comment. And keep in mind, again, I apologize for not interacting with the chat. Again, boomer gonna boomer. But if you have any comments, you have any thoughts that you want to share with me, my comment section's always open. And as anybody who is a regular on my channel can tell you, I'm very active in the comments. So if you want to talk, I'm always there. Or if you have a Twitter, right, I can be found on there as well, right? And we can talk there. I'm an open book. You may not necessarily agree with every page, but I am an open book. I have no problem answering questions, right? Just so long as we're all respectful and they're asked in sincerity, I'm fine with it. I like conversation. So there was that. But I believe, going back to Comic Boom, I believe he had left a comment when Tristan and I were debating over the whole Nubia trans Amazon thing. I believe he left a comment, something to the effect of that I wasn't taking into account like the influence or of the gods, right? When it comes to that, and with all due respect to Comic Boom, I read the issue, right? I read the Nubia issue, and I did read the Wikia about the Well of Souls, and from what I saw, at least in the first issue, the gods, or rather goddesses in this case, we are talking about the Amazons, they weren't much of a factor in the story. They didn't have any real influence, right? So I really can't bring up the gods if they're not really a factor in, or rather the goddesses, I should say, if they're not a factor in the story, right? Had the story mentioned, for example, right, that this is, Artemis's well of souls, and she is the one who decides which souls get resurrected, right? That would be different. But the story didn't say that. It didn't really establish exactly how the well of souls even identifies or tells the difference between a female soul and a male soul. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, that there's a lot that we don't know about exactly how the well of souls works, or how it identifies a trans individual. We can infer from the story that uh, the well of souls somehow is aware of a person's deeply held belief as regards their own gender and their own personal identity, right? So it appears to not always take into account, for example, biological gender, right? Birth gender, which to me seems like it would reject, say, trans men, right? Because trans men are born female, right? But they identify, right, their personal identity, their belief about their gender is that they really should have been born male, right? So obviously the Well of Souls is not, at least I would hope, it's not going to resurrect somebody who, in their heart of hearts and in the deepest parts of their soul, identified as a man. Though I do think, since we are talking about it, that there is, a lot of, let's say, trans male erasure. They, at least from what I've seen, they almost never get mentioned when it comes to the overall trans debate, right? And that's outside of comics, as well, when it comes to like sports or anything of that nature, or trans spaces or men's spaces or women's spaces or anything like that. So suffice it to say, we don't quite really know how the Well of Souls works. So again, I can't bring up the goddesses if they don't play a factor. And plus, what I was trying to do with that argument, which is why I was very specific in the questions I asked, and I asked Tristan, is this true? Do you agree with this? Is because I was trying to establish a fact pattern to show, okay, here are the agreed upon objective facts of the Well of Souls, of the story, of what happens in it, so that I could build to my argument of why, in my opinion, Bia, upon resurrection, is no longer a trans person, trans woman, I should say, is no longer a trans woman, and therefore is not a trans Amazon. Right now you can disagree with my conclusion, or you can agree with it. That's fine by by me, but that was the purpose. Had the gods been a factor in that, I would have mentioned them, but they weren't. They weren't really featured in the story, so I can't use that as part of my argument. Right, but still, thank you to Comic Boom about for the comment. Right, even if we disagree on this particular matter. And another one, I saw a comment or a super chat which I think was saying that I was trying to argue culture versus culture when Tristan and I were debating about the Superman no Superman losing the American way part of his motto, And yes, I don't know who that person was, but I do remember seeing it briefly in the super chat. That was my argument, that it's culture versus culture. I believe Tristan said at some point that she didn't understand or agree with my argument because she was viewing it as costume v costume, because I used katana as an example. So I'm going to try to clarify that a bit. My argument in this has always been, and you can check out the videos that I made on it, it's always been culture v culture, and in particular, other cultures being allowed to have a national hero or a cultural hero in comics, but the definitive cultural and national hero, the definitive American hero in Superman, which, keep in mind, his costume is patriotic in its own way. It may not necessarily be literally dressed in the flag like Captain America, but believe me, they chose the colors of red and blue, for example, for a reason, right? It is meant to evoke the American image, let's say. But my point, my point in that was that uh, other national heroes, other cultural heroes who represent countries that are not America, right? DC doesn't mind, having those characters and allowing them to, you know, wear their culture literally as their armor, as their costume, which is what Katana does, right? Everything about her is Japanese. Her given name, her hero name, her weapons, her armor. She literally wears a mask with with the rising sun, right, in the middle of it. You look at her and you can tell, if nothing else, she's Japanese, right? She represents the nation of Japan. And my argument was that if Superman has to lose this defining element, this iconic element about him, in case this change to his motto, this dropping of a certain part of the motto, which defines what he represents and where he comes from, and in which culture he represents, which nation he represents, truth, justice, in the American way, right? That if he has to lose that element that defines him specifically as an American, because it's not like his name does, right? Superman, in and of itself, is not distinctly American. You could say it's American egotism, but the words themselves, right, do not denote um, country, right? But truth, justice, in the American way does. And my argument was and continues to be that if he has to lose that part of his motto which defines him as an American, then other heroes in DC who are defined, whether in motto, whether in costume or name, by the country they come from, have to lose those distinct cultural elements as well. So, as in the example that I gave, Kitana would have to lose her hero name, her mask, her armor, her sword, everything that distinctly makes her Japanese, that makes her stand out, not just as a person who happens to be Japanese, but as a representative of the country itself to an American audience. That is my point, right? If Soup loses his culture, she has to lose hers, and that would apply for any specifically nationalistic, uh, culturally representative hero uh, in DC. If this were Marvel, for example, which is where more of my knowledge base lies, if this were Marvel, my argument would be if Captain America can't dress in the flag, then Captain Britain can't dress in the Union Jack, and Alpha Flight needs to disband, right? Because they're all Canadian heroes. So that was my point in that, right? That fair is fair. If the U.S. loses its, again, if Superman loses his American identity, if you cannot overtly acknowledge that he is an American hero, not just a hero from America, but an American hero, then you have to do the same thing to other national heroes in DC. And I want to be clear, I don't want this to happen. I don't want Katana or any other character who represents a country explicitly, right? In their name, their look, their design, whatever it is. I don't want them to lose their culture or anything like that, right? It was an argument about fairness and how you would have to apply the same standard to also non-American characters. But to be clear, I do not want to see Katana or any other character who fits that mold of representing a certain country changed, right? For example, if they did tone down or eliminate the distinctly Japanese elements about her design, right? I would be just as upset, and I would make a video talking about how let's say Disney, how DC is stupid for removing distinctly Japanese elements from a Japanese character, right? Fair is fair. If I'll defend Superman, despite not being a fan necessarily of the character, then I would defend Katana, right, on the same merits. The argument for me does not change, right? So that was my point. That was my point in it. So yeah, I think that's about it. I really can't think of anything else that I want to talk about. Other than that, Tristan did a video recently, I think, on the Dave Chappelle situation and about empathy. And I think that's a great video. And if you haven't checked it out yet, I think you should watch it, especially where she talks in the end about tribalism, because that is a real issue that just we as human beings have, right? Um, Not even criticizing, but necessarily, but like shaming and bullying people, even in our own supposed groups, just because that person has the gall to not fall 100% in lockstep with whatever the commonly established thought is. And that rears its ugly head in the culture war too. Whether you're comics gate or anti-comics gate, whether you're an SJW or an anti, whether you are pro indie or you're pro mainstream, both sides of it, right, engage in this behavior. I have been on other people's channels where Tristan will have left a comment where maybe she disagrees with the person's position, or she does a debate and she disagrees with the host, and some people, not everybody, but some people in the comments will just roast her for daring to have a different opinion or to see things differently. People can say and do what they want, and I don't blame the individual content creators. You can't really control an audience, but to those in the audience in those channels who did, basically just roast her. It's different if you have a particular argument and you are debating, right? Right. That's one thing. If you go, no, I see it like this, and here's why. Here's my evidence, and here's how I perceive it. That's one thing. But to those who were just roasting her on other people's channels because she has the gall to see things differently, because she doesn't always 100% agree with other people. Grow up. Really. Grow the up. Grow the F up. Right? You don't help your argument by pointing and laughing for because a person, had the gall to think differently. Right? Oh my gosh, she is okay with John Kent being bi. Okay. And if all you've got to add to that argument, or if your fundamental disagreement is I disagreed and I'm gonna make fun of anybody who doesn't see it as I do, then you need to go back to grade school and learn how to interact with people again. You don't move forward. You cannot engage in a meaningful conversation, if that's how you treat people, right? Uh, who have the goal to say, "Hey, I'm not really bothered uh, by this," right? Especially if your argument begins and ends with, "Oh, you disagree with me? You're stupid." That's not an argument. That's a sign of your immaturity. Sorry, I just wanted to get that off of my chest, right? But otherwise, yeah, that's about it. That's about it. And if Tristan or other people, have any comments or any thoughts, like I said, I'm easy to find and I'm an open book. So I believe I'll just end the video here. And I hope everyone is doing well. And I will see you all in the next one. Have a good day, night, wherever you are.